So, Maggie, you've got some very interesting journalism, some reporting.
Is that a broad statement? Or is
I mean that in general, and I mean that
you.
specifically within the last few hours in the New York Times. An article that you wrote, or one of the co-writers on,
Right.
which goes into how the president is using an unsecured iPhone to call his friends, and the Chinese are listening. That seems like a pretty big deal.
He's been warned repeatedly that the Chinese and the Russians are listening when he is on a cell phone, whether it is the personal iPhone that he continued using into last year and has held on to primarily because it has phone numbers listed in it that he couldn't store in the other one, or whether it's the government one. You know, all that they can do is strip it down as much as possible, a government phone. Those are not secure. You can still listen in. He was warned that this was a problem, and he would often ignore the warnings. He has gotten better about using the secure landline and using the switchboard phones. That is true, and using the Signal Corp to make calls. But this has been a very long and arduous process. And the related piece is that, you know, according to our reporting, Chinese officials have used what they are gathering from who he talks to try to influence who they believe are friends of his. One was Stephen Schwartzman of the Blackstone Group, and one was Steve Wynn, who is the casino magnate, until recently was the finance chair of the Republican National Committee. You know, you don't necessarily need to listen on those calls to know those are two people who you might want to try to influence as they then talk to the president, but it adds another dimension to why this is problematic.
Oh my gosh, Maggie, it is jaw-dropping. It is jaw-dropping in its hypocrisy. Hillary Clinton's emails are calling online too right now. But here's
lock her up.
Yeah,
we will hear at the next rally.
And being eavesdropped on by the Chinese, by the way.
And they can hear that. But here's what the president says to you this morning. The so-called experts on Trump over at the New York Times wrote a long and boring article on my cell phone usage that is so incorrect, I do not have time here to correct it. I only use government phones, capitalized, and have only one seldom used government cell phone. Story is so wrong.
I really liked your reading out of the "so" on that one.
Why?
This is very similar to the state. First of all, he doesn't actually say what is wrong about the story and the central thrust of the story, which is that he was warned repeatedly that there were intelligence ops being launched against his phone use, and that he basically ignored it over and over again. Number one. Number two, the story was not boring. If he wants to, he can say all kinds of things about it, but it was not a boring story. And number three, boring is the same word that he used about another not boring story in the New York Times, which was the 2-year-in-the-making deep dive into his financial situation over decades, and the fact that his personal narrative claiming that he was a self-made man with $1 million loan from his dad was not true, and that his father had actually subsidized his life, certainly through questionable means, for many decades. So I understand that is his reaction. He's perfectly entitled to his reaction, but we stand by our reporting.
I think that's my favorite reaction ever from you. Say what you want about the story, but it's not boring. Maggie Haberman, I appreciate you being with us.
Thanks.